about the concept of saying, I am the Lord your God. And to do that, we must begin today's sermon with a little history lesson. At some point, if you decide to ever go to seminary, you will confront, more than likely, what is called the Wesleyan Quadrilateral. This is credited to John Wesley, one of the founders of the Methodist Church. Are you all following me? Have you already fallen asleep with church history? Well, basically, John Wesley said that a person's faith is influenced by 4 different sources: Scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. And as a seminary student, you must then start to argue which one of these for you is the most important, or how do all of these actually relate to one another? So I began to think about this. We have spent the summer kind of examining what it means to be a Spirit-filled Pentecost type of church and community. And to do this, in many of these sermons, we are often thinking in a forward way. We ask daily, what is God calling me to do today? What is God calling me to do tomorrow? And yet we know that for us to actually be able to move forward in a faithful way, that we have to seek the wisdom of Scripture and traditions. And these wisdom moments must inform our movements forward. And so at that point, we also recognize that we have to combine them with our experiences along with what seems reasonable. Of course, we also know that sometimes reason isn't reasonable. Sometimes our experiences are limiting. Sometimes our understanding of Scripture isn't really well informed. And sometimes our traditions can hold us back and feel stagnant. So if we're going to truly move forward together, we also have to figure out how to look back together. And by moving backwards together or looking backwards, we may be able to find more energy to propel forward. And that energy will move us forward in a more powerful way than if we just started from a standstill place. It's kind of like a swing. If someone pushes a person on a swing, there does come a moment where they have to pull them back for the first time. In that moment, that person on the swing can only see straight down to the ground. In that moment, that person may have no idea when that other person pushing them is going to let go. And this can be an exhilarating moment. It can also be really frightening. Because it's hard sometimes to look down at the ground and know that instead of flying in the next moment, you may lose your grip. You may fall. And how a person feels in that moment, whether they are exhilarated or frightened, will come based on their experience or even their inexperience. They may even ask the question, have you fallen before? Or how they feel may also depend on their reasoning skills. Is it reasonable for me to be able to hold on to the swing at this time? Or they may have some tradition, some history. They've been able to look around and see others who are swinging, so someone else has done this before. And maybe if they're a person of faith, they go into their understandings of Scripture and how God works. God won't let me fall. That's what the Scripture says, but wait. I've read other Scripture that says God might let me fall. All of these thoughts and those types of moments of our lives can go multiple ways. And then we have to recognize that while we're having this experience, we're not only supposed to examine our experience and understandings, we are called to actively be engaged in the understandings and experiences of the others who are swinging around us. That faith is not something that we are to experience or do alone. That tradition and reason, scripture, and experience all together continue to teach us that we have to be in a community with those around us. And the community is the most powerful aspect. If we do fall, if someone's there, they can pick us up. If all of a sudden we do get to soar, then someone is there to cheer us on. Or there's always that moment with a young child, as I do all the time, where someone is there teaching us how to swing. While ultimately something on a swing can be done alone, it is an activity that actually starts when others are teaching us. And it's an activity that can be done more as a community and is more fun when it's done together, when someone is pushing you in this traditional childlike activity. And so this example reminds us that the Spirit of God calls us to look back. It's even more important when we're trying to look forward. However, looking back is not always easy. As I prepared this week to introduce you to another ministry, as we've done throughout the summer at our general level, I came across the weekly prayers that are posted on our global community through our Global Ministries website. This week's prayer was for Japan. Today is the 72nd anniversary of the nuclear bomb attack on Hiroshima, where over 200,000 people were killed, many of them civilians. Sometimes we have to swing backwards. And how you react, though, to what you just heard is determined by your experience, the traditions you know, the reason behind what happened, and the understanding of God in light of Scripture. And as I looked at the Global Ministries webpage, I did have a moment where I was able to celebrate the fact that we are part of a denomination and that we do not swing alone. We are participating as a group, also with other churches and communities, in hard and the real moments of life together that can be scary. That we have multiple levels that can help us swing back in ways that allow us to have even more strength and power when we choose to move forward. Because in that moment on the Global Ministries webpage, there was one prayer and one thought, and yet one resource that forced me to see beyond my bubble and my swing. I was reminded once again that God needs us to experience those moments in life that make us feel unbalanced sometimes and unnerved. And that to be able to move forward, we have to look around and sometimes look backwards. Global Ministries does that for me. It reminds me, when I examine all that is on there, that God is constantly needed for many, many lives beyond my bubble. And it shares in multiple ways. Weekly prayers, mission blogs, bulletin inserts, curricula for children and youth. There are multiple ways for you in this place and at home to participate in our global ministries, to learn about their activities and their partner organizations, and how that we can all respond faithfully when something tragic does happen. There are always ways, if you are interested, that you can travel as individuals, travel as groups, travel from our homes, or just learn from all the different resources on there from our homes about how God's mission is working in the world and how we are connected to that mission. There are even opportunities to become a global missional church. You see, we must not only look outside of these walls always to see where God is moving, but we must take time to look backwards beyond these walls. We must examine the world's experience within our reason. We must examine the Scriptures next to our traditions, and we must recognize that the ability to crash and burn is always present. But so is the ability to soar. And as people of faith, as Pentecost people, as Spirit-filled people, we know that when we soar, God will also soar with us, creating more power. Ultimately, you will come to discover, if you really think through the Wesleyan quadrilateral, at least in my argument and experience, that Scripture is the most important aspect. You can't really trust your own experience. It's still limited. Traditions have a lot of power, but they're limited, and your reason comes from your experience. So all of a sudden you go, what is the foundation? And it comes back to that book. It comes back to the Bible. This is why I have such a passion for our children and our young adults and those who feel like they don't know the stories that we hear, to know them, because it creates the ultimate foundation for our experiences, our traditions, and our energy and ability to move forward. And so today's scripture includes a phrase that is shared over and over in the Hebrew scriptures. It is important because it says, I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. And at times then it has other sayings after it, like who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And these are the first words of the 10 Commandments. And they show up again and again to remind us that God continues in the midst of all the heartaches and struggles to do great things for God's people. Even when God's people are not able to do such great things. That's a lamb? Oh, well, there are lots of important scholarship research around the power of this common phrase. I bring it to you today to remember that God is a God who has created a foundation that helps us remember that when we look back, there have been moments and stories and pain and hurt. And yet God has always found a way to heal that if we trust in God. Therefore, it is reasonable for us to know from the foundations of Scripture that we can live Spirit-filled lives even when hurt is still present, and that slowly we are able to heal by reminding that the world that we live in is God's, that God is able to again and again bring hope out of darkness, and God is able to bring promise out of wandering and bring us forward with the Spirit. And that Spirit is what is able to put the wind in our face and allow us as a community, as God's people and beloved, to truly soar.